welcome back to another episode of the AutoSuccess Executive Spotlight Series. Today in the AutoSuccess studio with me, I have Kristin Williams, the Manager of Dealer Development with DealerPRO Training. Welcome to the studio.
Thanks.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Happy to be here.
Awesome. Yeah, we're happy you're here as well. So to start, I'd love to just hear about you and how you found yourself in the auto industry and what you do with DealerPRO and what DealerPRO does for dealers.
Okay, fantastic. I'd be happy to share. Well, I grew up in the car business. My grandfather and my father both owned car dealerships in Missouri and Alaska. But I started out at 14 doing odd jobs around the dealership like many kids do. And then I went off to college, got my degree, came back, and I did some advertising for my father's dealerships. And then decided to stay home, and my husband and I got married, raised a family. I stayed home and raised my kids for about 15 years. So I went back to the workforce, and my dad, Don Reed, has started DealerPRO Training, started about 22 years ago. And I jumped on board about 8 years ago as the dealer development manager. I actually started out working with dealers just in Central Ohio, ramping up our training center for advisor and manager training courses that we offer there. And then now today, I handle our conventions and our marketing and advertising, and I also serve on our sales team and work with dealers across the country doing store analysis for them. And so, and that's really the bulk of what our company does, and one of the more important things that we provide dealers, and that is a 2-day analysis where we come on site and we look at their fixed ops performance, and we give them some reports and kind of evaluate where they are currently. We look at NADA benchmarks and give them a recommended plan on how our fixed ops training can help them.
Awesome. That's great. And fixed ops training is super important, and it seems like maybe now more than ever, people are very intensely focusing on fixed ops. Why is that? Why is that becoming such a big focus of dealerships?
Well, great question. So, as you know, over the last several years, dealers have seen increases in their volume in the front end in their sales, new and used car sales. And then here, obviously, in the last year and a half, we've all, understood the increases in gross profits that they're seeing on their new and used retail units. And once you kind of seeing those successes in the front end, your back end numbers, as they say, become glaringly in contrast, right? Mm-hmm. Can provide a glaring contrast as to, what you're really achieving in the back end. And I think a lot of dealers are reevaluating what they're doing in the back end. They're seeing that there are lost opportunities that are happening for a variety of reasons, whether that's due to staffing issues. We hear that a lot. We all know that technicians are in short supply. Mm-hmm. And that competition in finding good technicians has increased. And it's become more challenging for managers to really get a handle on, how to keep their technicians, how to find good technicians, and how to pay them. And we play a part in all of that. We help managers through training understand how to hire, interview, and locate those top performers. And then the flip side of that is taking the team that they have in place and helping them provide a higher level of customer service. And through training on better customer service, then your grosses go up. Absolutely. So I think dealers are turning to us more. We are definitely getting more leads, and our phone is ringing, so to speak, more now, because in some ways they also are tapped out in the front end, with the shortages of vehicles and things. Sure. So where can we make gains and improvements on a daily basis, whether it's because they're not needed as much in the front end. Maybe they're needed more in the back end now. They see that. So dealers and general managers and fixed ops directors are really honing in on those opportunities.
So just speaking of improvements that dealers could be making in the back end, obviously we all know in every industry time is money, and we're hearing more and more about dealers wanting to spend less time on repair orders. So say a dealership has an average repair order time of 2 hours. How can they improve that time?
Yeah, so that's a great question as well. And so average is a funny word, right? It means different things to different people. We talk to dealers who have been to their 20 group, and they go, our 20 group average, we're at 2.2 hours per RO. But I'll tell you, in what we see, and we're in hundreds of rooftops, on average, a lot of dealers are seeing in that 1.2 to 1.7 hours per hour range. So whether you're at that or you're at 2 hours per hour, it's a great question to ask. So how do you improve that number? Well, a lot of it really does fall in the service drive, right? And we all know that advisors play a big role in that. That doesn't always tell the whole story. Advisors, if we want advisors to improve their hours per hour, that really focuses on two things. Providing a good multi-point inspection presentation, right? And providing a maintenance menu presentation to the customer. Doing that on every visit consistently. However, advisors will say, I don't have time, and sometimes they really don't. Sometimes they feel like they're so busy and they have the ability to do it, but oftentimes, they really don't. Or their shop is maxed out, and so they're less inclined to want to sell, right? Because I can't handle it. I'm going to have to set a new appointment for this customer. I can't, they're in here for an oil change, and I found that they need brakes. We don't have time to do it. I'm going to have to set that second appointment. So there's lots of reasons why hours per hour sometimes stagnate below benchmark, which in a domestic store, we would want to see hours per hour around that 2.5 to 3.0 range if they're doing diesel work, right? So yeah, but a lot of the, I would say, efforts should be spent on advisors providing a consistent process with every customer, and that should include a menu presentation and an MPI presentation, provided those MPIs are being done thoroughly and accurately for them to give the customer that good information and then let them decide, what's needed on their vehicle.
Right. And I'm sure there's a lot more areas for improvement that many dealerships could implement that you may recommend to your clients.
Sure.
What are the most successful dealers you're seeing right now? What improvements have they been making in recent years? Have you been noticing?
So, I'll tell you, the dealers that we see that are in the top, let's say, 20% performance-wise, there's some key things that they do really well every day. Number one, they're engaged with their fixed ops managers. They know what their service managers are facing. They know what their current performance is. They know the questions to ask to get to the deeper issues that the departments may be facing, and they know how to help their managers. Another key thing is that measuring performance every day, just like they do in the front end. So knowing what the department is facing, not only the department, but individual employees, and making sure that their managers are tracking performance. And then when you're tracking performance, the other piece of that is having conversations about it. How do your employees get better at it? And really, and this is no reflection on service and parts managers, they're doing the best that they can as well.
Right.
But how do we get a dealer, a general manager, a service and or a parts manager, all on the same page and getting that support that the departments need to hold their employees accountable to performance, but then coaching them and training them and mentoring them and developing those employee skills to perform to the level that they want.
So say a company hires DealerPRO training to help with these processes, to help improve exactly what you were just talking about. What does that process look like for a dealer? I know you have an on-site training center, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
But then you also were saying you come on to the dealer's physical lots to help with them. What does the process look like?
Yeah, great question. We get calls for various reasons from different dealers, whether it's our advisors are underperforming, our shop productivity is low. Nobody knows how to manage time back here, we're kind of flying by the seat of our pants. We hear that a lot. And for us, the first step is to really have us come on site and do a thorough analysis. And if you've never had that kind of analysis done, it can be really insightful because it's never just as simple as what one person thinks that issue is,
Sure.
Whether it's a dealer that's calling us and, they always have a different perspective than what maybe a service manager has. So coming on site allows us to get everybody together, meet with the managers, hear from them, what areas they'd like us to take a look at, what areas they think are their areas of opportunity. And so we do an on-site analysis that not only includes observation of how the employees are, what processes they're following, what are their communication skills with the customer on the phone and in the drive. But we look at everybody. We look at the advisors, the BDC reps, the parts counter, service and parts managers take a look at the shop and the layout. All these things come into play as to why we're behaving the way that we are and why we're lagging in performance. So we look at those pieces, and then we also look at the financials. So we pull a couple years of financial statements to kind of see a trend analysis of their labor sales and gross, their parts sales and gross. We pull DMS reports. We look at technician payroll so we can calculate technician productivity. And then from all that data and information gathering over about 2 days, in addition to that, we do a repair order analysis. Repair order analysis, if you're not already doing one in your store, I recommend everybody do that at least once a month, maybe more often if you've got new advisors. It tells you everything you need to know about the advisor's performance in the drive and kind of what's happening on those repair orders. We take 75 customer pay repair orders and 25 internals, and we put together a couple reports just on those repair orders alone. So all told, we give the dealer 8 reports. We spend about an hour reviewing those reports, and then we'll put together a training recommendation based on what we find. And some stores are performing better than others. Some are extremely profitable. Some are a little bit in the red and need some help there. So all of that comes into play to determine then, okay, what's the best training plan? So training-wise, whether it's in dealership training, we have a training center like you mentioned in Columbus, Ohio, or we can provide workshop training, and that really applies to stores that have more than one rooftop. You know, if you've got 3, 4, 5, 10, 30 rooftops, workshop training may be more scalable and make more sense for what you're trying to accomplish with your advisor team, let's say, or your manager team. But at the end of the day, we custom build whatever training it is for a dealer. So in dealership might be a combination of in dealership and sending folks to our training center in Ohio.
Are there training opportunities that dealers can use for new hires?
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of fixed operations, there's opportunities for advisors and service managers, and I'm sure our company isn't the only one out there that offers those opportunities. One of the things that we do provide is a centralized location, literally in the middle of the country in Columbus, Ohio, where we offer a 2-day advisor course and a 3-day fixed ops management and leadership course. And the nice thing about that is whether you've trained with us or somebody else, it's a place you can turn to at any time, and we have lots of our alumni dealers or multi-store groups that use our training sessions as part of their onboarding process. So before you get them on the DMS, you can send them to our training center in Ohio and get them trained up before they ever, meet their first customer. And it's a really great way to get them comprehensive training, even if they're an advisor coming from another dealership where they've got some experience. Everything that's covered in the advisor course is not only appropriate for what we like to say green peas or new hires, but it's also applicable to experienced advisors that have been in the business for many years. And the reason I know that is because many of them that have been through the training center tell us, this is fantastic training. It gave me a little bit more technical awareness. It explained scheduling, from a better standpoint, so I actually understand that if I'm the one scheduling appointments, I know how that impacts our shop productivity. And then on the fixed ops management and leadership side of things, that 3-day course, most service and parts managers tell us they've never gotten any professional training in any way. And you get those folks that come through the training center that have been doing this for 15, 20, 25 years that say, again, this was so comprehensive and high level as well. Some of our service and parts managers out there have never seen a financial statement, or if they do, they don't really take the time to analyze that information and determine, where do they need to cut expenses, where do they need to increase the gross, how are they going to go about doing that. So we train for 3 days on that, and about 25% of our attendees in our fixed ops management leadership are dealers and GMs.
Wow.
Because many of them tell us, they came up through the sales and F&I side, didn't really get any fixed ops training, so it can be a really economical way to get some training. And then, like I said, an onboarding process is fantastic. When you can hire an employee and know that they can get training right out of the gate before they talk to their first customer, I think would be valuable.
Absolutely. And my initial reaction to that is, yes, this is a great investment for the business to provide the best possible processes from an employee standpoint, but new hires would probably feel very valued that the company is investing in them as well. So I have to imagine in this competitive hiring stage that would be a very good differentiator between companies.
Yeah, and there are studies out there that talk about the younger workforce, right? Those that are coming out of college or even in their mid to late 20s, and that is an important thing for them, ongoing education and training in their job. Some studies put that number one, some studies put that number two as far as how they evaluate whether they're going to accept a position or not. And in the automobile business, particularly in service and parts, I think there's room for improvement in that area to provide a regular training option to our new employees. And sometimes that gets overlooked. And we don't discover, the results of that until we're a few years down the road and maybe we've had some turnover in positions. And that can be one of the reasons why, you see turnover in an advisor position. It's not an easy spot to be in.
Right.
To be thrown to, 12, 15, in some cases 20 customers a day and have no training on how to handle those customers coming in the door. So yeah, it's an extremely valuable opportunity to sell new hires on and make your employees feel like, they're cared about and valued and you're investing in them.
Absolutely. Thank you for those perspectives. I find that very interesting, just and what you were saying about the younger generation coming in and how it's changing the industry a little bit. You've provided a lot of great perspectives on improvements that can be found on the back end. I would like you to just leave one last thought with our audience. What's the first thing that you suggest dealers do when they are trying to improve these processes?
Well, here's how I look at it. We have to, before you make any decisions or, change course in your department, right? You've got to stop and evaluate what's going on. And sometimes that evaluation stops short of looking at all the different processes, all the different roles, that people are playing back in service and parts. And that's the first step that I would recommend any dealer or general manager take is get in the back, pull some DMS reports, pull some financials. You can do this on your own, or you can have a company like DealerPRO come in and help you with that. But I would look at all aspects because too often we hone in on that one area where we feel it's lagging, and oftentimes it's what's happening in the service lane, right? Our hours per hour are low, our dollars per hour are low, our grosses are down. That doesn't always tell the whole story. There's a lot of processes and that happen not only in the service department but interdepartmentally between service and parts technicians, advisors, that impact performance and profitability. So I would sit down with your managers and do an analysis and look for things. We like to look at NADA benchmarks as the guides that we should all be following. They're proven to be true. The most successful dealers are hitting all those benchmarks. So what are those benchmarks? Doing our own analysis by advisors so that you can determine how many customers are they seeing a day. The average advisor should be seeing anywhere from 12 to 15 customers on any given day. If they're an express only advisor, maybe they can see 20 customers a day is kind of what we're looking for. But 12 to 15 customers a day allows them to have those conversations, build rapport with the customer, do those MPIs, walk-arounds, all the things that we know are good foundational practices in the drive. I would also look at your shop productivity. Your shop productivity, NADA says, should be around 100 to 120%. So if you're in that 70, 80% range, sit down and come up with a plan on how you're going to increase your shop productivity, right? We know that technicians, we've got fantastic employees back there, but it's an aging workforce in many respects. So we've got some older technicians oftentimes that maybe they're turning 70, 80% productivity. And that's the best that they can bring to the table. Who are the other guys or gals in the shop that can bring more productivity to the table to make up for that number? And that's kind of how you have to look at it. So evaluate your shop productivity. Your gross profit per technician in a domestic store should be somewhere around $17,000, $18,000. We have stores that are performing at that level. So if you're in the $10,000 to $12,000 gross profit per technician, again, why are your grosses so low? When we've got advisors that are selling more in the drive, we now have more work per vehicle, so less vehicles going up and down the lifts, right? So higher shop productivity. Looking at your service net to gross, NADA says it should be at 20%. Your parts net to gross should be at 30%. Are those out of line? And if they're out of line, why are they out of line? Reviewing CSI, we all know that that still is important to take a look at. We often like to look at the individual items that are in that CSI review, right, that report. What are customers saying about your store? If you look, most times, not all, but a lot of times, it's all communication related. Sure. And that comes down to, again, training your team on better communication and customer service, both on the phone and in the drive. So look at your CSI scores. Your labor and parts margins. Your labor margin benchmark should be around 72 to 75%. And how do you affect your labor margin? You either decrease your technician cost of sale or you increase your effective labor rate. So again, what's our plan? What are we going to do to increase our labor margin? Is there a lot of discounting going on back in the shop that we either don't know about or we're giving everybody free rein, to discount for their customers? Mm-hmm. Parts margin. Do you have a pricing matrix in place? Do you have one that bears what your market bears out where you are? Have you looked at that in recent years? Many dealers tell us we've got the same pricing matrix in place that we had 20 years ago. Wow. We haven't really looked at it or tweaked it recently. So you got to take a look at that. This is not any kind of NADA average, but again, what we see oftentimes in stores is anywhere from 55 to 70% service absorption, I would say, is kind of the average range that we see stores operating in.
And they should be at 100.
And they should be at 100, and that is a very viable metric to look at. Hours per RO, we already talked about earlier. Mm-hmm. But again, I'll say hours per RO should be definitely above 2.0, but if they're in that 2.2 to 2.5 range, that's where you want to be, and even above that, we've seen stores operating in that range as well. So I would do a thorough evaluation of your department, do it with your managers, make sure your managers are involved in the process, they take ownership of that, and set goals with your managers, help them determine how they're going to get there. And if you need to pull in a company like DealerPRO, we're more than happy to do that, but there's all kinds of resources out there that you can rely on as well online or through various resources, podcasts, webinars, those sorts of things.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you so much for your expertise today. It was definitely a very educational talk we just had. Our guest today has been Kristin Williams, the Manager of Dealer Development with DealerPRO Training. Thanks for coming in today.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.